The world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. He's trying to persuade the prince he should do his duty. To impress him, takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.
What's up, people? So, holy shit, yeah. Today I'm going to be doing a movie review on Oppenheimer. Before we start, spoiler warning. Even though it's weird to say a spoiler warning for for this kind of film, since you can literally just search up the story and at least get, a pretty good idea of this, but spoiler warning. So as usual, I'm going to give you the breakdown. First will be my initial thoughts, then we get into the positive and negative. For the positive is going to be the cinematography / practical effects, Oppenheimer's mental state, how muddled it was, the big boom and how tense it was, and the actual pacing of the story. And then for the negatives, I'm going to be talking about the nudity scenes, and it was kind of unnecessary, misplacement / missed opportunities, and then unhearable dialogue, which is, I guess, not really a surprise if you've seen, other Nolan films, if you're a fan of them. And then I'll end it with my ending thoughts. So upon seeing the little bit of Oppenheimer while in a theater from last year, the title, it sounded familiar to me, but I just couldn't quite remember it. So eventually, when I searched up the name and learned that it was based around the atomic bomb, my interest just spiked to a point where I did some reading / watch videos on getting a better idea of the history of it. And especially with my enjoyment of Dunkirk, I was curious on how he will depict this kind of historical event. Alright, so first I'm going to get into the cinematography / practical effects. So looking at certain shots really captured on the moment when it got closer to the testing and the impact on the atomic bomb, to even capturing the facial expression of Oppenheimer. It really helped pinpoint certain moments in trying to get the idea on how devastating making such a device, while going along with the build-up, making it unique, as well as the very little usage of CGI, and Christopher Nolan wanting to limit that as much as possible. And it's just that thought alone of the dedication that Nolan put into this, especially with recreating the bomb explosion, in which he really nailed it. So now I'm going to go into Oppenheimer's mental state. It was very evident about Oppenheimer's state on the atomic bomb. He had to face the consequences, regardless how he felt about the making throughout the process, or even upon the completion / testing. It really felt psychological in that aspects when you really just sit down and think about it. At first, he might have looked joyful on the success of the bomb going off, but ultimately he was likely hesitant about it. A clear indicator of that is when he gave a speech when he heard about the US dropping them on Japan, and he was not only having these pauses in between, but having visual deep thoughts, or visions I should say, on the aftermath and how it must have really looked like and experienced when they dropped them. And ultimately, this kind of mental state, has taken a toll on Oppenheimer's behavior, even during his younger years, which were pretty unstable. Examples being is when he injected the professor's apple with liquid cyanide and having a complicated relationship with Jean Tatlock. And it's not just that. It also didn't help that, upon the completion of the bomb and testing it was successful, eventually he was suspected of having connections with the Soviet Union, and that just put more stress on him. Just goes to show that even though Oppenheimer was quite an intellectual physicist based around theories he wanted to test on, and the amount of weight he must have felt on whether or not he is seen as a hero or a man that created such a deadly device that will inspire others to make bigger bombs. Especially, as I said, with past events as well, that has played a role in the kind of mental state that he is. And it's just, a fireball of complicated scenarios he had to face. And now I'm going to talk about the big boom and how tense it was. Even though things started to develop more tension upon the events leading up to the first testing, it's the actual testing itself that really was peak tension in my eyes. One detail I liked, once the bomb went off, after the countdown and everything went silent, was the heavy breathing from Oppenheimer. It was that moment that felt like the most realistic scene of all the film. And last I'm going to talk about the pacing of the story. So I feel like this is where things will make or break for people when watching this kind of film. But really, there's one thing that I want to say that we need to take consideration for this, that I've seen other reviews on, and a kind of point that people have said. And that particular point is that this isn't like the kind of typical action film that a lot of people, I would say, are tuned into, and they're kind of like accustomed to, like, I guess, seeing in all the movies kind of being released. This kind of story is very rounded and is taken to such a realism route. So really, this isn't the kind of film that is like probably going to be enjoyed by a lot of people, and I wouldn't blame them. I wouldn't. But past all that, pacing was constant, and with the back and forth sequences of the different time periods, really went well together. Especially from the build-up to the bomb testing to the interrogation of Oppenheimer is where it really shines, like at its best. One thing I will say, and this is going to be a little bit of a negative, is that I would have liked to at least seen Oppenheimer's early life, or like early years, to just be like this constant thing, not have like this back and forth. You can still have the voice of like Oppenheimer in the future when he was being interrogated in that, and I kind of like talking in the sequences. But then after, like, we kind of just see like from the build-up that he had like this passion that he had in him, and then immediately just jump right into the interrogation, and then you can start doing the back and forth sequences. And now I'll be going into the negatives. One of those being the nudity scenes, and really just felt unnecessary. I get that Nolan was showing us, I guess, the love ratio between Oppenheimer and Jean in the form of a sex/nudity scene, but really it didn't really serve any importance since it didn't really focus so much on the relationship like details, like in depth. It generally would have served the same purpose if they just, started to be, flirty with each other and then show them like done doing the business, and then you can just continue on from there. And now I'll be getting to misplacements/missed opportunities. So there were certain moments in the film that I felt were like placed at the wrong time. An example being during the sex scene when Jean told Oppenheimer to read a line from a book that she picked out, and it was the infamous quote. That kind of quote to me didn't really fit in that scenario. In the other usage of this quote, it was during when the bomb went off. They kind of sneaked in that little quote in there. That was a better placement. And another being, like, I guess the sex moment during the integration when finding out about the affair that he was having with Jean when he was married to Kitty. It just kind of took off like the tension and seriousness. Now, in terms of missed opportunities, two comes to mind. One of them being to having more scenes of the scientists that Oppenheimer brought along to this Manhattan project, and actually visually see like their ideas that they had with the making of this bomb. It would have added more depth, and another is based around the infamous quote. While I did like that the quote fit better and how they sneaked it in with the bomb going off, as I mentioned before, I believe that I think the best usage for this kind of quote would have been to recreate a clip that was during an NBC News documentary called The Decision to Drop the Bomb in 1965, and having that quote said while looking at the expression of Oppenheimer would have been really like just more chilling and unnerving. And lastly, I don't think this is going to be like a surprise to anyone, and that is unhearable dialogue. I'm aware that this has been an issue with some of Nolan's past films, and it does occur at times with this one. But I wouldn't say on like a constant basis, which is good since I still understood, a majority of the film anyways, but, still, it would have better if it just did not happen at all. So overall, this is without a doubt my most anticipated film for this year. Whether it's the visual capturing and depicting Oppenheimer's mental state on the making of the bomb and feeling as he had blood on his hands, to literally sensing the bomb blast after a bit of time going off, there is a lot to take from this film. This film is a great reminder on the gray areas of history, and that in this case, it was a very complicated process, and it's not a definitive answer whether the creation of the atomic bomb was for the better or for the worse. As for the rating of this film, I definitely have to give it a 9.5 out of 10. I really hope this movie can have like a really big success. But anyways, later.